I'm Tom Collins, Executive Director of the Arizona Citizens Clean Elections Commission, Arizona's nonpartisan voter education agency. And today we're here to try to introduce voters and folks to lobbying and how the legislative process works at the Arizona legislature. The Arizona legislature will start its new session on January 9th with a new legislature that was just elected in November. And so we're excited to have the opportunity today to have Senator Sean Bowie, who is a member of the Arizona State Senate. He was elected in 2016 to represent Legislative District 18, which encompassed South Tempe, West Chandler, and Phoenix. This will be the end of his term coming up here, and but he is also a professor of practice at Arizona State University's College of Public Service and Community Solutions. He's a fellow at the Common Sense Institute in Arizona, and his policymaking approach has been really influential over his 3 terms since he was elected in 2016 on issues ranging from economic development and tax policy to housing and education. And that continues today. Beth Lewallan is a leading expert in Arizona government relations and public policy research. She's provided research and communications expertise to many elected and appointed officials in state and local government, including the Arizona Senate, Maricopa County, the County Supervisors Association, and the Arizona Board of Regents. Her knowledge of government makes her a go-to source for those who want to understand and communicate policymaking processes, which is what we're going to try to do here today. It's a real honor to have these 2 experts lend their time to us to discuss government relations, lobbying, the legislative process, and to shed a little light on what can sometimes seem like a bit of a mystery to people. So thank you both very much for being here today.
Thanks for having us, Tom.
So I think I might start, Beth, if you could, with sort of an overarching question of what is lobbying?
That's a great question, Tom. Thanks for having us. I think lobbying gets framed in TV and movies as one thing, which really is not accurate. Lobbying is communicating a position for or against a bill to policymakers. And so there are certainly people who are paid to do that for a career, but also, citizens can engage and lobby for and against what they want. So really, in the core, lobbying is trying to influence the outcome of a policy decision.
So, Senator Bowie, you've now, were elected in 2016. You've had 3 terms in office. Coming at it, as having been a policy person before you were elected and then being elected, what do you see as some of the differences between maybe what you might have expected in your experience working with lobbyists on policy issues versus how it really works?
Well, one of the things that surprises you when you get there is just the volume of bills that you're dealing with. And every year there's usually almost 2,000 bills that are introduced across dozens of different policy areas. And, any legislator who comes in, nobody's an expert on every issue. And it's really important in understanding those bills to know how they're going to impact people, not just your constituents, but everyone in the state. So it's really helpful to either hear from individuals or hear from lobbyists representing different groups, how those bills are going to impact them. For example, if it's a bill relating to K-12 schools, I would want to know, well, how do my school districts feel about this? How would it impact them? They have lobbyists. I'm sure I have parents and community members who have feelings as well. So they definitely play a critical role. And most of our time during session is spent talking to people who are going to be impacted by these bills and why we should, vote yes or vote no on the bills that we consider.
Sure. No, that's a very good point. A question, I guess, for Beth, when you're thinking through government relations issues and approaching them, how does that work? What is a government relations professional, whether it's for a school district or perhaps for an economic development agency? How do you sort of analyze issues and what's your goal in going through that process?
I think a lot of groups have different methods. The core of the issue is that the government relations professionals want to be on the ground with the best possible information that they can have, with the goal being to make the outcoming policy the best for that entity or that organization they represent. So internally, they really are going to rely on the experts. In a school district, they're going to go to the school administrators, to the teachers, to, as the senator said, to parents who are impacted by that policy. And so internally, a professional government relations individual or team would be navigating that information, sending the bill language to professionals who can say, here's how this would impact us. Here's what these budget numbers would mean for our students, for our teachers. And so it's facilitating information really at every level of government relations.
So, Senator Bowie, when you when you talk to your constituents and voters, in Legislative District 18, if you were asked, how can I'm a voter and I'm interested in a particular issue, what would be the best thing that a voter, a resident, a parent, what can they bring to you? What is the kind of information that can help you make the case that they're looking to make on a policy issue that affects them?
Well, first of all, signing up for a request to speak and using that is really important. That's something where any Arizonan can go online and sign in on bills and say whether they're for or against them. But for me, I get this question a lot. People asking, how can they be impactful? How can they reach out to the legislators? And what I always say is, if you personalize your communication to your legislators, we get hundreds of emails a day during session. Most of those are, spam or just mass messages to every member. But if you're a constituent of mine and you send me an email or you call our office and you just indicate, hey, I live in your district, my kid goes to this school, this bill is really important to me, and this is why, I'm absolutely going to read that and respond to that and make sure I have a conversation with you. So personalizing your messages and just trying to build relationships with your legislators, I think, is really important. And it's a lot easier than most people think. I think most of my colleagues would absolutely take the time to listen and consider perspectives if they know it's coming from a real constituent of theirs in their districts.
Sure, right. So personal approach really matters in terms of making sure that the person you're writing to is your legislator, and and explaining that you're in the district and how that affects you. That's, I think, a very important point. Beth, the legislature provides, as Senator Bowie mentioned, the request to speak process. What are some of the other ways that folks can sort of check in on the legislative process, both on issues and then who's sort of vying for a certain policy to be enacted?
The legislature's website in Arizona really does a great job of providing all the information that you need to follow it. As the senator said, there's a request to speak system where you do have to go to the Capitol or work with an interest group who will help you create an account originally, but then just, from your home, you can log in and just represent your position. You can include comments that will go to the legislators as they're considering that bill throughout the process. Also on that page, though, you can find the language of all the bills that are being considered. You can find the schedules, the list of committee members that you'd want to contact as a bill moves through the process. On each bill, there's a link called For, Against, Neutral, or RTS, I think is how they reference it. And so you can just click on that tab, again, for every bill they post this, and scroll through the list to see who has logged in to register which position. And so it really creates an opportunity for anyone who's interested. You can search by topic, you can search by keyword. It really, it's daunting, the idea, because there are these, thousands of bills moving through the process, but the website really makes it user-friendly once you spend a little bit of time with it to follow the issues yourself and to register, your support to communicate directly with your lawmakers. It does provide email addresses where, as the senator said, if you customize it, if you let them know that it's not just noise, that it really is a position that impacts their district and your life, that does get through to them all through that website, which is azcleanelections.gov.
So we're coming up, as I said at the beginning, on the beginning of the next legislative session, which will start on January 9th. We're going to have had a inauguration of a new governor and new executive branch officials. So that's a significant change. Senator Bowie, obviously you'll be watching this, I'm sure. What are some of the issues you think are going to be important in this legislative session?
There's going to be a lot of turnover, as you mentioned. We have a new governor coming in, but a lot more turnover than is typical. I think over half the legislature is going to be brand new, and that's for a lot of reasons because of redistricting and just retirements and people running for other offices. But there are going to be a lot of new faces, entirely new leadership teams in both chambers, and it's going to be divided government for the first time in over a decade. So it'll be very interesting at the Capitol next year. We got a lot done this year. We passed a really big bipartisan budget where we spent a lot of dollars on K-12 education, water, and infrastructure, and a lot of other issues. So the economy is still doing pretty well. So we should be okay from a revenue standpoint, at least for this next year. But as far as issues that'll be important, water is going to continue to be one of the most important issues. We did a lot this year on water, allocating $1 billion for water infrastructure for the state, but we still need to do more. Obviously, elections and voting issues are going to continue to be important. A lot of folks feel very strongly about that. So I'll just leave it at that. It's really going to be interesting to see how Governor-elect Hobbs and the Republican majority work together because we have checks and balances. The governor needs the legislature and the legislature needs the governor. So it'll be really interesting to see how both sides come to the table, and it could be a very quick session or it could be a very long session like it was the last 2 years.
So speaking of that, just for a moment, if I can follow up on so one of the things we've talked about in the past is the budget and how important that is. Can you give us a sense when you're, as a legislator, when you're going into the session, like when you rank issues, is the budget sort of number one in your mind on how you're going to drive policy?
Well, the budget's the most important thing that we do. Leadership will start taking a look at that early in the session. The governor, on the opening day of session, will give her State of the State address, and then later that week, she will outline her executive budget proposal, which is kind of a wish list for what the governor wants. And then during session, they would work with legislative leadership. We're getting continual forecasts about how many dollars are available and how the economy is doing. So it's worked on throughout the session. That January through March timeframe, you're really busy with bills and getting bills through the process. But it is being worked on concurrently with the regular legislative process. So years like this past session, we were there until the end of June because it took quite a while to get agreement on that, and it ended up being a bipartisan agreement. But this next year, obviously, it'll be divided government. So I could see it being very quick, but I could also see it being very long. So we'll see.
And Beth, one last question for you. I mean, sort of, what are you kind of looking at if you're kind of, as the session comes up? Any other issues hanging out there that you think people might want to be aware of?
Yeah, well, following up on what the senator said, this concept of divided government, I think will be it's a big unknown of how this will unfold. There's certainly more reason, more incentive, more need to find some bipartisan cooperation than we've seen in the past. But it relies on people wanting to do that. This election cycle really sidelined some of the moderate voices at the legislature, especially through the primary election where some, further fringes of each caucus were elected. And so I think, the early days of this session will be really key to kind of set a tone. We've seen other legislators quoted in the media about the beginning of this will really set the tone for the next 4 years on both sides of the aisle, on both branches of government. And so I think just going into it, that's what I'm really watching, just how these entities and these individuals work together. They've all known each other for years. The Governor-elect Hobbs was in the legislature for a very long time. And so how those long-term relationships build into these conversations that we're going to see. I think the issues that the senator outlined are certainly at the top of the list. I think there will be a continued focus on housing and ending homelessness around the state. That's a bipartisan issue that's really drawn a lot of attention as the problem has grown in all areas. we will certainly see a lot of the high-profile kind of headline-grabbing issues that will keep Arizona in the headlines. We know abortion right out of the gate will be an important topic on both sides of the aisle. The governor-elect has made it clear she hopes to act on that quickly. Some legislators and legislative leaders have said they hope to act on it quickly, of course, with a totally opposite approach to what they hope to achieve. And so, there are many reasons I think that citizens will want to pay attention and will want to be engaged. As the senator mentioned, the number of new legislators really is staggering this year. And so the start of any session is always overwhelming, no matter how many years you've done this or been down there. And so to have this many legislators new to the process and new to the conversation, I think they will really be relying on hearing from their constituents about all these issues as they move, they move quickly through the process. And so it's very important for them to understand how all these proposals will impact actual Arizonans.
Well, thank you. And thank you all for joining us today. I think that really does provide a good overview and a really exciting time. As both of you mentioned, we have a lot of new legislators, an incredibly large new class of legislators, divided government for the first time in more than 10 years, and major issues from education to water to housing on the docket. So I really would encourage folks to check out our website, azcleanelections.gov, where you can find ways to contact all of your lawmakers and other policymakers, as well as Beth mentioned, the legislature's website, where you can do the same thing and take advantage of the request to speak system. I want to thank Beth and Senator Bowie. Beth is available on Twitter at italicized.az. It's the #1 follow if you want to know the inner workings of state government. And Senator Bowie is available on Twitter at Sean Bowie. That's SEAN, and Bowie like the rock star. You can also read his plan and analysis on housing that he did for the Common Sense Institute recently there as well. So thank you very much for giving us and our viewers this overview. This was absolutely great. Can't thank you enough, and we look forward to seeing everyone online.